You're at a family gathering. Someone mentions a coworker just had twins. The room lights up. Congratulations pour in. Everyone reaches for their phone to see photos. But the real answer to why twins fascinate you is far stranger. For most of human history, that same news would have triggered something else entirely. Not joy, not celebration, fear. Real, communal, sometimes lethal fear. Think about that for a second. The same biological event. 2 babies born at once. And depending on where and when you were born, it meant either a divine blessing or a death sentence. Why would something so natural feel so unnatural to your ancestors? Start with the body itself. Your body, stripped of every modern explanation. No textbooks, no ultrasounds, no understanding of genetics. Just observation. And observation told ancient people something important. Humans were not supposed to have more than 1 baby at a time. Litters belonged to animals. Dogs had litters. Cats had litters. Pigs had litters. Humans had 1 baby. 1. That was the rule, as far as anyone could see. So when a woman gave birth to 2 babies at once, it broke the rule. It looked less like a human event and more like an animal one. And in a world without science to explain it, that break in the pattern felt dangerous. It felt unnatural. Sometimes it felt supernatural. You have to sit with that idea for a moment. Twins weren't just rare. They were a glitch in the system, as far as the ancient mind could tell. And glitches demand explanations. Here's where it gets even stranger. Without any concept of how conception actually worked, many cultures reached for the only explanation that made sense to them. If a woman had 2 babies, she must have been with 2 men. Read that again. Twins, to many ancient societies, were not a biological coincidence. They were evidence. Evidence of infidelity. Evidence that a mother had betrayed her husband, her family, her tribe. This wasn't a fringe belief. It was widespread. A woman who gave birth to twins could find herself accused, shamed, sometimes punished, sometimes exiled from the very community that should have protected her and her newborns. The babies arrived as a miracle of biology. The mother was treated as a criminal. Why would an entire society turn against a woman for something her body did without her control? Because fear doesn't ask for proof. Fear asks for someone to blame. And it wasn't only suspicion of the mother. It was fear of the children themselves. In numerous traditional cultures, twins were seen as something darker. Not blessings, not miracles, omens, bad luck given a heartbeat. Some communities believed twins were demons in disguise, or spirits that had slipped into the human world through a crack that should have stayed closed. This fear had consequences. Real ones. Among the Igbo and Efik peoples of West Africa, twins were once believed to bring a curse down on the entire village. Crops could fail. Disease could spread. Misfortune could follow the whole community, all because of 2 infants who had done nothing but be born together. To prevent that curse, the babies were sometimes taken into the forest and left there. Not out of cruelty in the way you might first imagine, but out of terror. A terror so deep that abandoning newborns felt, to those communities, like the only way to save everyone else. In Madagascar, the Antandroy people held similar beliefs. Twins represented a threat to the social and spiritual order, and infanticide became a tragic, ritualized response to that threat. Sit with the weight of that for a moment. 2 newborns, indistinguishable in their need, in their innocence, in their humanity, and yet their very existence was treated as a crisis requiring intervention. Distance didn't make the fear go away. Different parts of the world reached the same conclusion through entirely separate paths. In ancient Siberia, the danger wasn't only spiritual. It was brutally physical. Carrying twins placed enormous strain on a mother's body. Birth was already dangerous in the ancient world. Twin birth multiplied that danger. Complications were common. Death, for the mother, was a real and frequent outcome. So in Siberian communities, twins didn't just represent a supernatural anomaly. They represented mortal risk. A mother who survived twin birth had beaten odds that claimed many others. And in some of these societies, surviving wasn't enough to avoid punishment. She could still face exile, treated as if she had done something wrong, simply by surviving something the body was never built to easily endure. 2 babies, 1 unprepared body. A society without modern medicine to soften the danger. It's almost too easy, looking back from where you stand now, to judge these reactions as primitive or cruel. But pause before you do that. Ask yourself what your ancestors actually had to work with. No germ theory, no understanding of fertilization, no concept of fraternal versus identical twins, no statistics to explain why this happened to one woman and not another. Just fear and the human need to explain the unexplainable. Fear, when left without facts, tends to build its own logic. And that logic, however strange it seems now, felt completely rational to the people living inside it. But here's the twist that makes this story so much richer than simple fear. Not every culture ran from twins. Some ran straight toward them. In direct contrast to the abandonment and suspicion found elsewhere, the Yoruba people of West Africa built an entire spiritual framework around twins, one rooted not in fear, but in reverence. To the Yoruba, twins were not a curse. They were a divine blessing, a gift from the spiritual world delivered into the physical one. This wasn't a passive belief either. It came with structure, ritual, and devotion. The Yoruba believed twins shared a single soul split between 2 bodies, 1 spirit, 2 heartbeats. That belief alone reshaped how an entire culture treated multiple birth, and it led to something extraordinary. If one twin died, whether as an infant or later in life, the surviving family didn't simply grieve and move forward in the way you might expect. They commissioned a carved wooden figure known as an heir abeji, crafted specifically to represent the soul of the twin who had passed. This wasn't a decorative object placed on a shelf and forgotten. The family treated the carving as if it were the living child. They bathed it. They dressed it in fine clothing. They fed it, offering food just as they would to the surviving twin. All of this, done with the belief that keeping the carving cared for would preserve the spiritual bond between the 2 souls, even with one of them gone from the physical world. Doesn't that completely reframe what you thought you knew about grief in ancient cultures? This wasn't superstition for its own sake. It was an entire emotional and spiritual technology built to manage loss in a way that honored connection rather than severing it. Where other cultures saw twins as a danger to be removed, the Yoruba saw them as a sacred bond worth protecting, even beyond death. And the rituals around living twins were just as intricate. Some traditional African communities believed twins were so spiritually linked that they would fall ill at the same time, struck by the same sickness on the same day, as if their bodies were tethered by something invisible. To break that dangerous connection, elders performed specific rituals at sunrise. In one such practice, a mother placed ash across her chest, a symbolic act meant to mark protection or separation. Meanwhile, the twin infants were carried in opposite directions, physically pulled apart from one another. The goal wasn't to weaken their bond. It was to separate their physical destinies, so that if illness or misfortune came for one, it wouldn't automatically claim the other. Notice the difference here. This isn't fear-driven abandonment. This is careful, deliberate ritual, designed to protect rather than reject. The Ga-Dangme people of Ghana took reverence even further, transforming the presence of twins into a yearly celebration. During their annual Yam Festival, twins take on a special, almost ceremonial role within the community. They carry a blend of herbs and water through the village, an offering meant to wash away bad luck and invite abundance for everyone. Picture that contrast for a moment. In one part of the world, twins were carried into the forest and left to die. In another, twins were carried through the village as honored figures, believed to bring prosperity to an entire community. Same biological event. Completely different cultural destiny. What separated these outcomes wasn't the twins themselves. It was the meaning each society chose to assign to them. And nowhere is that meaning more elaborately woven than in ancient Greece. The Greeks didn't see twins as a glitch in nature or as proof of betrayal. They saw twins as something almost cosmic, a bridge connecting the mortal world to the heavens above. This idea wasn't confined to folklore at the edges of Greek society. It sat at the very center of their mythology, in the form of two of their most powerful deities, Apollo and Artemis. Apollo, god of the sun, music, prophecy, and reason. Artemis, goddess of the moon, the hunt, and the wild. Twin gods, opposite in many ways, yet bound together by birth. Their presence in Greek mythology wasn't accidental. It reflected exactly how Greek society viewed twins more broadly, as beings touched by something greater than ordinary humanity, respected, honored, and, just as often, feared for the power they were believed to carry. But there's another set of Greek twins, lesser known to modern audiences, whose story might be even stranger and even more emotionally resonant than Apollo and Artemis: Castor and Pollux. These twins share a mother, but here's where their story takes a turn that sounds almost like modern science fiction. According to the myth, Castor and Pollux were born from what's now understood, biologically, as heteropaternal superfecundation. In plain terms, that means twins conceived from two separate biological fathers during the same pregnancy. It sounds impossible at first, but it's a real, documented biological phenomenon. It happens when a woman releases two eggs during the same cycle, and those eggs are fertilized by sperm from two different men, resulting in twins who share a mother but not a father. The Greeks, of course, didn't have modern genetics to explain this. They had myth. And the myth they told was extraordinary. In the story, Pollux was the son of Zeus, king of the gods. That divine parentage meant Pollux was immortal. He could not die. Castor, on the other hand, was the son of a mortal king. He carried no divine protection. He was just as fragile, just as mortal as any other man. Two brothers, one immortal, one mortal. Bound by birth, but never equal in fate. That imbalance became the heart of the most powerful part of their story. When Castor was killed in battle, Pollux was devastated. Grief, for an immortal being, isn't something that simply fades with time the way it might for a mortal. Pollux had to face the reality of eternity stretching out before him, entirely without his brother. So he made a request. He went to Zeus, his father, and begged to share his immortality with Castor. Not to live forever alone, but to find a way for his mortal brother to remain by his side, regardless of the cost. Zeus, moved by the depth of that bond, agreed to a solution that became one of the most enduring images in Greek mythology. He placed the two brothers together in the night sky, forever bound as the constellation you now know as Gemini. Doesn't that completely reframe what a constellation actually represents? It wasn't just a pattern of stars to ancient sailors. It was a symbol of unbreakable loyalty, a brother's grief transformed into something eternal and visible from anywhere on Earth. And that symbol carried real, practical weight in ancient Greek life. Sailors, facing the unpredictable terror of the open sea, prayed to Castor and Pollux for protection. Storms, shipwrecks, the constant threat of disaster at sea, all of it felt slightly less overwhelming with the twin brothers watching from above. Twin gods, born from a strange and complicated biological event, became guardians for an entire culture's most dangerous journeys. Greek mythology didn't stop with the heavens, either. Other cultures built their own legendary twin pairs into the very foundation of their worldview. The Maya, in Mesoamerica, told the story of the hero twins in their sacred creation narratives. These weren't simple side characters. They were central figures in the Maya understanding of balance, sacrifice, and the structure of the universe itself. The hero twins descended into the underworld, faced trials designed to destroy them, and outwitted death itself through cleverness and unity. Their story became a symbol of balance between opposing forces, life and death, light and darkness, order and chaos. And just as importantly, the Maya saw these twins as ancestors of great leaders, weaving their mythological journey directly into the bloodline and legitimacy of Maya rulers. To be connected to the hero, twins wasn't just a spiritual honor, it was a claim to power. Notice the pattern forming here. Across entirely separate civilizations, with no contact or shared cultural exchange, twins kept showing up as symbols of something greater than themselves. Cosmic balance, sacred power, the thin, mysterious boundary between life and death. Why does this pattern repeat itself across cultures that never even knew of each other's existence? Because the human mind, when faced with something rare and unexplainable, doesn't simply shrug and move on. It reaches for meaning, it builds stories, it creates rituals, and in the process, it transforms biology into mythology. Modern science has, of course, completely reshaped this conversation. Researchers studying twin biology now understand mechanisms that would have seemed like pure magic to ancient observers. Take the work of biologist Charles Boclage, who has spent decades researching the biological mechanisms behind twinning, including how early developmental processes can lead to fraternal or identical twins forming in the womb. His research highlights just how intricate and biologically determined twin formation actually is, a process governed by cellular splitting and hormonal timing rather than supernatural intervention or maternal betrayal. Geneticist Nancy Segal has spent much of her career studying twins specifically to understand the balance between genetics and environment in human development. Her research using twin studies has become foundational in psychology and behavioral genetics, helping scientists separate what's inherited from what's learned. Twins, it turns out, aren't just culturally fascinating. They're scientifically invaluable, offering researchers a rare natural experiment for understanding human development itself. And demographic researchers have spent years tracking something even more striking. Twin birth rates have been steadily rising across the globe, driven largely by increased use of fertility treatments and a rising average age of mothers at childbirth. What was once a rare and feared anomaly is now, statistically, becoming more common with each passing decade. Think about how strange that progression really is. The same event that once triggered infanticide in some cultures and worship in others is now, in many parts of the world, simply a medical statistic. Routine. Explainable. Tracked on a chart instead of woven into a myth. But ask yourself honestly, has the wonder actually disappeared? Or has it just changed shape? Because here's the truth hiding beneath all of this history. Your brain still reacts to twins differently than it reacts to a single birth. Even now, with full access to modern science, something in your psychology responds to twins as something unusual, something worth noticing, worth talking about, worth pulling out your phone to capture. You don't run to the forest. You don't carve a wooden statue. You don't pray to constellations before a long voyage. But the underlying instinct, the pull toward pattern-breaking, rare, biologically striking events hasn't disappeared. It's just been repackaged for a modern audience. Think about how often twins appear in movies, television, and viral social media content. Twin pranks, twin telepathy experiments, mistaken identity storylines. There's a reason this content performs so well. Your brain is still wired to find twins fascinating, even if you can't always articulate why. That fascination is ancient. It's older than science, older than written history, older than most of the religions you might recognize today. It's baked into the way human minds process anomalies, rare patterns, and the uncanny feeling of seeing two faces that are nearly, but not quite, identical. Every time you scroll past a video of identical twins finishing each other's sentences, some old, ancestral part of your brain is doing exactly what it did thousands of years ago. Noticing, wondering, searching, just slightly, for meaning in the pattern. You don't carry the fear your ancient ancestors carried. You don't see twins as omens or curses or proof of infidelity. But you do carry their curiosity, their drawn-out fascination with something that breaks the expected rhythm of birth, life, and identity. It's worth pausing here and asking what this entire history actually reveals about you, not just about twins. It reveals that meaning has never been fixed. The same biological event was once interpreted as a curse in one village and a blessing in another, sometimes only a few hundred miles apart. There was no universal, built-in truth about what twins meant. There was only the story each culture chose to tell. And that's true of far more than just twins. It's true of how every society throughout history has handled the unexplainable. Disease, birth defects, natural disasters. Anything that broke the expected pattern eventually got wrapped in myth, ritual, or fear, simply because explanation was the only way the human mind knew how to cope with uncertainty. You live in a world where most of that uncertainty has been replaced with explanation. You know about fraternal and identical twins. You understand fertility treatments. You understand genetics in a way no ancient observer ever could. And yet, the emotional response, that flicker of fascination, hasn't gone anywhere. Maybe that's the real lesson hiding inside this entire story. Knowledge doesn't erase wonder. It just changes its shape. Your ancestors looked at twins and saw gods, demons, omens, and curses, because that was the only language available to explain something so rare and so strange. You look at twins and see biology, statistics, and viral videos, because that's the language available to you now. But underneath both responses sits the same ancient, unchanged human instinct, the need to make sense of something that breaks the rules. So the next time you see twins, whether in person, on a screen, or simply mentioned in passing, notice that flicker of curiosity rising inside you. That flicker connects you directly to Yoruba families honoring twin souls through sacred carvings. It connects you to Greek sailors praying to Castor and Pollux before sailing into a storm. It connects you to Maya rulers tracing their legitimacy back to hero twins who outwitted death itself. History didn't disappear when science arrived. It just moved underground, hiding quietly inside instincts you rarely stop to examine. You're not so different from your ancestors, after all. You've just traded fear and worship for curiosity and explanation. And maybe that's the most fascinating twist of this entire story. The wonder never left. It only became far stranger than you ever expected. If this kind of history fascinates you, hit that like button and subscribe, because there's so much more hidden in human history just waiting to be uncovered.